the previous videos, we compared the research report for the Master's and PhD's program. The comparisons was made due to the questions that how do we differentiate the levels and the requirements for the Master's programs and the PhD program. Since that the mode of studies are similar, where both the Master's program and the PhD programs are doing research, there are gray area. How do we distinguish the levels of the Masters and PhDs? We look into the matter by comparing the natures of the report as produced for the Masters and PhDs. For the Masters, the students will have to showcase the knowledge and expertise gained through studying the research program, and also demonstrate the ability to carry out a research systematically, rigorously, and properly justified. As long as the students can demonstrate these two items, even though most of the content here are existing knowledge, the students shall be entitled for master's degree. The main purpose here is to know the students have the ability to carry out research, and also to know the students have sufficient knowledge in depth and expertise related to the field of study. However, these requirements are insufficient for PhDs. In fact, what is required at the master level, that will be the prerequisite as expected from a PhD candidate. This is not sufficient for the students to acquire PhD degree. The main difference here, it will be developing new concepts, new theories, and contribute information to existing literature in the research field. The emphasis here is on the new things that can offered by PhD to the research community. Because of this requirement here, a PhD candidate will have to prove that the proposed theories and knowledge are new, original, and novel, which at the same time the PhD candidate will have to demonstrate the process to develop in order to justify the correctness and accuracy of the relevant theories. Here, the emphasis it will be on the new things. As compared to the master level, the students only need to demonstrate they have the ability to carry out the research. Having this as the basis to differentiate the Masters and PhD, we shall continue our discussions with different levels of the studies, looking into various aspects of the research report. I feel this should be helpful to you when you are undertaking the final year project or doing your Masters or doing your PhDs. Knowing this is very important in order to prevent overdoing of the master degree or underestimating the PhD program. Without further ado, let us look into every single item. Regarding the purpose here, if we are talking about the final year project, which is the bachelor degree, it is a project actually. Normally we don't term it as a thesis or dissertations, as the research report here shall be considered as the project report. Now the purpose here is to demonstrate or have exposures to the technique of research. As long as you can prove that you have been exposed to the technique of research, that should be sufficient for the final year project in the bachelor degree. However, in the master's level, you have to demonstrate the competencies to carry out the research. As the term masters imply, we are talking about mastery of the techniques of carrying out the research. As for the PhD level, the focus here is to formulate knowledge for general applications. In order to formulate the knowledge for general applications, you are deemed to have already mastered the techniques of carrying out research. In fact, if you have not mastered the techniques of carrying out the research, you will have difficulties to formulate the knowledge and contributing to existing literature in the field of the studies. Now, looking at the purposes here, you will see now the levels of difficulty increase from the final year project to PhD degree. The expectations is higher. You just need to know the process of the research and probably have the experience of going through a research. As long as you have done that, you compile it in the report, then you should be qualified for the final year project. But now when you come to the master degree, you have to prove the competency and masteries of the research technique. There are a lot of minor things there that you have to take it seriously in order to demonstrate your masteries in the research technique. As compared to final year project, the expectation here is higher and the details are more refined. But when you reach to the PhD levels, all this become the supplementary to the requirement, which ultimately you are required to formulate new knowledge and offer contributions to the research community. In terms of the function here, final year project only need to carry out a complete cycle of the research project. As for the masters and also the PhD, you will need to find the gaps and fill the research gap. As for the levels, final year project is the basis, master will be moderate, and PhD the advanced research level. Now we can look into the scopes for the masters, PhDs, and the final year project. These are the items that you normally see in the reports for the FYP, masters, and PhDs. There shall be investigations, there shall be result, there shall be analysis, and you need to give some discussions over the result and analysis. You know that the purpose here is to demonstrate that you have gone through the entire cycle of the research project. Whether you are at the mastery level, not important. Whether you are able to develop or formulate new knowledge, that one is also not the requirement for the final year project. You will need discussions here because we also want to look into the critical thinking aspects. There should be elements of the synthesis of the knowledge. Now, when it comes to the master degree, whatever that you have in the final year project, you should have it also. There should be one additional item, which is the findings after you have carried out the research. And this finding cannot be just simply any summaries of what you have found from carrying out the research. The findings need to be well proven and well justified. This should be in line with the natures of carrying out the research. And normally we look at how you formulate the findings as well as the in-depth discussions for us to determine how competent are you in carrying out the research. This shall involve high levels of thinking orders, synthesize the knowledge, explaining the results, phenomena, and observations from the first principles. The discussions cannot stop at finding the relationship between the parameters or explaining what you have observed from the research. You will also need to look into the aspect why this and why that. Now, when it comes to the PhD degree, whichever item that you have in the Masters shall also be in the PhDs. There is one more additional items that will be the new theories that you have developed or formulated for general applications. Ultimately, these are the things that are going to be contributed to the field of the studies. You know that in order to come up with the theory here, researchers will have to go through all this process in order to come to a new theory. Now, the functions of having the research result and finding well documented, it is that to save the times of the future researcher. If the theories that you have developed here is accurate and reliable, in futures, new researcher may adopt your theory without going through your process of formulating the theories. This becomes the decisive criteria for acquiring these PhDs. Now the problem here is how do you prove the reliability and accuracy of these theories? We shall look into your entire research process here. Is it systematic? Is it biased? Is it rigorous? And is it reliable? Next, we talk about the analysis and the results related to different levels of studies. For the final year project level, you only need to demonstrate the analysis procedures and describe the result obtained. Probably put some discussions in terms of the relationship between the parameters. Then, when you come to the master's level, you will need to explain, demonstrate, and justify the analysis procedures. You can't just simply adopt a procedures without proper justifications. As the purpose here is to demonstrate the competency of carrying out the research. Selecting the best procedures and methods in order to carry out the research is a part of the competency of carrying out the research. You will have to determine and decide on the best procedures that yields to you the best outcome so that you can discuss, analyze, and acquire findings based on the result yielded from these procedures. And then you will have to discuss the result, your interpretations, as well as the principles. You need to highlight your finding as well. What you see here, to demonstrate your competency of carrying out the research here, it constitutes two main parts. The first part here is using the right methods to carry out the research. And the second part here, it will be how do you interpret, process, analyze the results as acquired from the methodology that you have chosen. And the levels of the depth that we are looking at the master here, it will be definitely higher than the final year project. You will need to justify the procedures, and you will have to explain why this and why that based on the observations and the phenomena. And then based on what you have observed and what you have interpreted, you will have to formulate your findings to better explain the phenomena and the relationship or even the working mechanism behind the observations. Next, when it comes to the PhD level, justify, select proper methodologies to carry out the research is a must. Now you need to discuss the result, justify your interpretations, support your findings with evidence, and formulate theories. You will see that this part here, it will be much more rigorous than the masters. Everything will have to stand on the justifications, evidence, and then you will have to formulate new theories out of your research study. If you are demonstrating how you carry out the research merely, you are not qualified for a PhD. You should also demonstrate how you formulate the theories. And often, this is much more complicated as compared to the master's degree. Next, we talk about the investigations that involve with the final year project, masters and PhDs. This one is very subjected to the field of the studies. Personally, I will define by this manner. First, you will need to know that the investigations in the field of engineering, the most common category it will be experimental, numerical, empirical, analytical, survey studies and others. You know that different types of investigations have their own unique characteristics. They have their advantage and also limitations. If you are talking about the final year project, the purpose here is for you to demonstrate that you have exposed to the relevant technique of research. In this case, you can adopt any of these methods in order for you to carry out the research. As long as you can prove that the method that you have selected is carried out carefully, minimize the possible errors or bias, doing in accordance to the right procedures, and that should be sufficient. But when it comes to the master here, it is not the method oriented. You are not demonstrating how many methods that you can do. You are demonstrating how competent are you to carry out the research. Not only you have to justify the method that you use, you will have to also justify the reliability of the findings. Now we mentioned that there are so many methods of investigations. Each they have the advantage and limitations. There is no one perfect method here without any limitations. Now the requirement is the competency of carrying out the research. Knowing the limitations of those methods of investigations, you know that you cannot rely on one method to yield the conclusions for your study, because there could be some limitations that you cannot overcome. Now, in order to overcome this, you require more than one of this investigation method. Now, the focus here is not the numbers of methods that you use to carry out a research. The focus here, it will be how you use the two methods here to compensate each other, using the advantage of one method to cover the limitations of the others. Now, if the two methods here can effectively complement each other, this shall increase the reliability of your findings. So at the end of the day, I would say that one method for the master research program is insufficient. You will require two methods at least to cross-check each other in order to prove the reliability of the findings. And how you select the two methods, how do they complement each other? This is related to the competency of designing a research program. And this is the part that you will have to prove in order for you to acquire your master degree. And then when you talk about the PhD degree, the proper research program will have to be carried out. That means definitely you cannot solely rely on one research method. You will also need to demonstrate the competency of carrying out the good research. That means you have to prove that the methods you have selected, they can actually complement each other. Now another additional requirement here, it will be the depth of the study for the PhDs and masters. We are also looking into the thoroughness of the study. Therefore, It is possible for a PhD students to use more than 2 methods in order to carry out the research, to increase the confidence level, and to use those methods here to cross-check each other and to prove the theories that you are formulating. With that, I would say that out of various investigation methods, you will need to use more than 2 methods, or at least 2 methods, as long as you can prove the reliability and the accuracy of the theories that you have proposed. Next, we talk about the analytical study. You know that engineering research normally deals with the formulas and equations. And remember that the purpose of the PhD here is to formulate knowledge for general applications. Now, the analytical model or equations is one of the methods to simplify the findings and theories, and also to be used for the general applications. And in most of the engineering research, the analytical studies, it will be something that you cannot miss. Now, for the final year project here, the analytical study is not required. In order to carry out the analytical study, you know that the levels of complexity is relatively higher, which sometimes is beyond the capability or capacity of a final year project students. However, this doesn't restrict the final year students to carry out the research using the analytical study. The point here is the analytical study is not a must for the final year project students. Now, when it comes to the master's study, the analytical study will have to be in place, as this is a part of the research as well. So normally a master students will have to derive or adopt existing equations with proper verifications. Now, doing these analytical studies at the master level doesn't necessarily require you to develop new equations. You may adopt the existing equations, or you can impose some modifications to the existing equations, or probably compile several equations and derive accordingly to yield a new equation model. Having this done, you will have to do some verifications in order to determine the reliability of the equations that you use to explain a phenomena or to explain your research topic at the master level. Now, when it comes to the PhD levels, you will need to derive or modify the existing equations. Normally, we are looking into the new equations, adopting all the findings and observations as acquired throughout the research program. There will be a process of verifications to determine the reliability and the confidence levels of the equations. And then those equations should be made in the general or generic conditions for general applications. The main difference between the PhD and the master here is that the equation here, it will be rather specific, referring to that particular case under the same conditions as per carried out in the master program. These equations may not necessarily be applicable for the other similar conditions, and it is very custom-made to that particular research. But when it comes to the PhDs, the focus now is not on the project basis. It is referring to the fundamental knowledge and concept levels. Under different circumstances, the fundamental principles may be similar, Now your ultimate goal here is to derive the equations to be applicable under different circumstances, but having the same principles governing it. Instead of the applications, the equations derived from the PhD level should theoretically be more generic and applicable under broader cases.